All right, everybody. Thank you so much for joining us. This is the Monday, November 4th, Morgan State seminar on blockchain interoperability. Share screen. And today's presenter is Peter Sumagivari from Accenture. I'll let Peter introduce himself, but this is where I get to embarrass our presenter. Peter is one of our awesome community members. He's also a fantastic maintainer and a member of the Technical Advisory Council for the Linux Foundation. Straight up rock star. We cannot thank him enough for doing this. And I warned him that I would embarrass him, and I'm so glad I was able to do that. But thank you, Peter, for doing this. This is great. This is Linux Foundation Decentralized Trust. We're part of the Linux Foundation's flagship organization for the development and deployment of decentralized systems and technologies. As with all Linux Foundation meetings, this is held in the Linux Foundation antitrust policy. If you have questions about these matters, contact your company counsel, or if you're a member of the Linux Foundation, feel free to contact Andrew Updegrove of the firm Gesmer Updegrove LLP, which provides legal counsel to the Linux Foundation. And it is also held under the Linux Foundation Code of Conduct. All are welcome here. Everyone's question is welcome. Please keep it topical. Please keep it on topic. But be kind, be good. And thank you so much for coming. Lastly, get involved. Open source only works if with your help. Use the software, modify the software, contribute back, sign up for a Linux Foundation account, check out the code on GitHub, look for bugs, look for good first tickets, which is a tag on GitHub. We have contribution guidelines for projects. We have meeting docs and a wiki, and also communication channels like email lists and Discord. All of these links are going to be shared in a few moments in chat, and I'll share it once or twice during the call. And now I'm going to turn it over to Professor Emdad from the FinTech Center at Morgan State University. We cannot be more proud to work with this group. They are fantastic. And Professor, please say a few words.
Thank you, Sean. Welcome to the 2024 webinar series that is offered jointly by Linux Foundation Decentralized Trust, LFDT, and Morgan State University's National FinTech Center. We want to really express our deep appreciation for all the work that Sean Bohan has done, and also to the LFDT team for the constant support of Morgan State and our network of more than 65 HBCUs. Thank you, Peter, for sharing your expertise in this increasingly important area. The National FinTech Center's mission is to build capacity in blockchain and fintech at Morgan and at more than 65 HBCUs nationwide. We will share the recording of all of our webinars with all our members at various universities throughout our network so that they can use them in their classes. Please visit our website at fintech.morgan.edu to learn about our programs and events, information on various activities that we have. And I want to, again, thank you, Peter, and also thank all the participants for this webinar.
And with that, Peter, you're up. Peter, you're muted.
Sorry. Thank you, Sean. Thank you all. It is my honor to present here today. Let me just share my screen real quick. All right. Can you see my screen?
Looks good. Sounds good.
Awesome. All right. So welcome, everyone. My name is Peter Sumagivari. Sean gave me the best introduction ever. It's quite possibly the best intro I've ever received. So thank you again for that. And today we're going to talk about blockchain interop. Interop is important, and I'll tell you why. But first, just a very quick, pretty much the conclusion of the talk in very short. What does it mean? It means to be able to perform cross-chain transactions the same way interbank protocols enable cross-bank transactions. Simply put, if you have a bank account and your friend has a bank account at a different bank, then interbank transaction protocols are necessary for you to be able to send some sort of money to them. And so this is the very high level definition I'm going to start off with. If this already makes perfect sense to you and you know all the technical details behind it, then there won't be too much new information to talk. But if you just ask yourself, okay, but what does any of that mean, then bear with me and we shall go through the details. And one more thing about why is it important. It's because if blockchain use cases are to thrive, they need adoption. And I believe interoperability enables this adoption. So what that means is if you let people transact across different ledgers easily and in a user-friendly manner, then they will be more likely to use the system as a whole because you will have a bigger critical mass that you can leverage to develop the use case. Very, very simple diagrams for now. Bank A, Bank B, you're sending money. You will use some sort of interoperability to make that happen. And pretty much the same thing if you have blockchain A, blockchain B. So in that sense, this is very loosely defined, but chains could be analogous to banks in that sense. Again, a lot of people would probably be very pissed at me for taking such a simplified view of it, but we're just starting out and I'm trying to give simple and easy to digest definitions. We'll get into the weeds a little later. And so the importance, again, there's one other aspect of it, which is security. It's very important to work on interop for me personally, because there have been a lot of very high profile hacks in the last couple of years. A total of $2.5 billion have been stolen from different interop solutions that are out there today in production. So this topic is important because money is flowing through these solutions as of today, and that money needs to be secured. And then one more thing to mention is siloed ledgers. So without interoperability, you are stuck with whatever ledger you're on. There are hundreds or probably thousands of them out there today. And if you can only transact and do things on the ledger that you are on right now, if you're unable to financially or otherwise, data-wise, interact with other people on other ledgers, then the critical mass for adoption is not very likely to be reached. Okay, so that was the very quick intro to answer the questions in the title of the talk. I like to start with the distilled down version of the information that will be presented so that people can decide whether it's interesting or not. And now we'll get into some more details. We'll get to talk about the basics, and I'll focus a little bit in the beginning on the traditional financial system, because blockchain is a derivative of that in the sense that it tries to achieve the same thing, but with different constraints, different designs. But for people, for end users, at the end of the day, the use case is the same. If you want to transact money somewhere to someone, then you just want it to be secure. You want it to be done as quickly as possible and as cheaply as possible. So in the beginning, I'll spend some time just explaining what a bank is, how do we define a bank, what a database is. and things like that. But bear with me, then we'll get into the interoperability blockchain parts as well. And then finally, I will present some of the building blocks, software-wise, that people use to build these solutions, and then explain a little bit more about one of the actual protocols that is made up from some of these building blocks. Then we'll close with the Q&A, and that's going to be hopefully within time. And just one more disclaimer is that the topic at hand cannot easily be compressed into a short presentation such as this. There could be many books written about it. So that's why I will be short in details, but I'll try to provide as many references and links throughout the slides as possible. Of course, I will provide the slides after the presentation, so you're welcome to go through them again. And there will be plenty of reading material for you if you want to dive deeper. And just one more quick note about Linux decentralized, or Linux Foundation Decentralized Trust, excuse me. It's a great organization, and within that, there's a software project called Hyperledger Cacti, which I am a maintainer of, as Sean explained. And if you are ever interested in getting involved in there, then you're more than welcome to. We have daily pair programming calls on a Discord voice channel. And if you'd like to talk to me personally about something related to Cacti software development, then you're welcome to come and ask. It's open for everyone. So terminology, just to get that out of the way. DLT, if I say DLT, I mean distributed ledger technology, which is, for all intents and purposes, is going to be a synonym to blockchain. The same goes for ledger or chain. These all just usually mean the same thing in the context of this presentation. In other contexts, people might get pedantic and say, well, this actually means that exactly, and that other thing means something else. But here we'll just keep it simple. So remember I said that there will be a little bit of a traditional finance angle. So first we start by saying, what is a database? Well, a database consists of tables, and a database table is literally like a spreadsheet. If you've seen one, you've most likely seen one. And there's Microsoft Excel, Google Sheets. It just has tabulated data like the one I'm showing on the slides. And so a database, what that essentially is, a spreadsheet data that you have and the ability to query it. So if you run a structured query language query, which is SQL, to filter based on a person's first name, then you can actually get the results back. It's very similar to the filtering logic in spreadsheets, but it can do way more complicated stuff. And it can also update the data, which is very important. That comes a little later. So putting all that together, what is a banking database? It's a set of tables. Again, very, very simplified, because I want to go through this relatively quick so that we don't get bogged down with the quote unquote boring stuff. You can store people in a table. People can have bank accounts. This three-legged little line means that each person can have any number of accounts, but an account will only have one person as the owner of that account. And so with this, you can represent people having any number of accounts with any bank, savings account, checking account. You've probably seen these. And then there's another table for storing the transactions, which is again something that you would have seen on an app, on a banking app. They list your transactions. You just record who sent to whom and how much. And you can see here that one person sent $20 to the other person, and then an hour later, the other person sent it back. It's just a very playful, simple scenario. And this is where I stop for a second to say or define what the ACID compliant database engines are. There's a complicated definition on the slides. I'm not going to read it, of course, but there's more on the link as well. And what you need to know about this is just that banks use this type of database so that when you send someone money in a bank, they can store this transaction that I was showing just in the previous slide and then make sure that the data is not lost and not corrupted. And that's pretty much the bank's one job. If I got money, I don't want to lose it. If I sent someone money, they don't want to lose it. So everyone is very heavily financially and emotionally invested in this thing working. The technical guarantees or the technical implementation behind those guarantees is called ACID transaction guarantees. So we define what a banking database is, and now we define what a bank is. It's really just everything else built around the database that makes it work. You have buildings, people in them, bank employees, bank branches, and ATMs. And then you have a domestic banking system, which is a set of banks within a country. So this is where you have to start thinking about interoperability for traditional finance, which will be similar to blockchain interoperability on the conceptual level. You see that all of these banks have to have the ability to send money to each other, which means that they have to have some sort of system pre-agreed upon so that there's no accidents where money just gets lost in transit, for example. And then if you zoom out further, if you look at the whole planet, then you'll see that multiple countries can have multiple banks. They all need to be able to also transact with each other. But a lot of times this is not even possible. For example, if you have some small regional bank with a checking account and you try to send someone money in a different country, they may just tell you, oh, that's not possible. You have to first send the money to a different bank that offers this and then pay that other bank a lot of money to perform that transaction. So this is the kind of use case that blockchain is attempting to solve, or one of them anyway. If you could make it cheaper, if you could make it faster, less complicated, that would be great. And all this just to demonstrate that there's a lot of parallels between banking and blockchain from the financial perspective. And that makes it hopefully much easier to digest some of the terminology that I'll start using in the blockchain interop section. So I'm going to stop here for a second and ask if anyone has any questions about this so far. I admit I forgot to look at the chat, so I'll
No, not a problem, Peter. We don't have any questions yet, but if someone has a question, please put it in chat. We can get to it.
Okay.
If not, Peter, push on ahead and we'll take a break a little bit and check again on questions.
All right. So now let's define the blockchain. It's conceptually the same as the banking database. It just has a different consensus model. What this means is that those transactions that I was showing you, those are organized into blocks, which is just a collection of transactions, really. And then everyone who is participating in the chain has to sign off on it. That's what we call consensus. Well, not everyone, but the majority. That's important. And this is something where I'll talk a little bit about trust. If you go to the bank and you send your neighbor some money, you trust the bank with your money. First of all, you already trusted it when you deposited it. and then you trust the bank to send that money to your neighbor and not someone else, or just take it, etc. So what you're really trusting there is that the bank employees will not commit a crime and take the money, and you're also trusting the regulators to actually enforce the laws, meaning that you trust that if a bank employee were to take your money, then they would go in, they would sue them, or somehow otherwise take the money back on your behalf. Now, on the blockchain, it's a little more of a wild west in this sense, because you are trusting the consensus, but the consensus of strangers on the internet, basically. So this is an important difference. And the reason why I wanted to highlight this is because this then feeds back into some of the differences between the traditional finance system versus blockchain. But for now, we can just leave it at that. There's blocks, chains of blocks, and they can be verified that they were part of the consensus, and therefore everyone agrees that this is the state of the ledger. And so back to interoperability, what that means is that you can transact between different ledgers back and forth if interoperability is possible. And so the hard part comes with seeking or achieving a sort of agreement on which protocols these should be, how should they work. And the even harder part is securing them, as I was showing on my earlier slide. 2.5 billion lost in the last couple of years because people thought they had secure software, but they did not. And there are other people out there who are very good at finding these holes and then taking advantage of them some of the time. So a little more terminology. Public permission ledger is what you hear from probably in the mainstream media if you talk about Bitcoin or Ethereum. What this means is that it's publicly available. Anyone can join and participate. You can get some Ethereum wallet installed on your phone, put some ETH on it, and you're good to go. You can transact with that money that you have in there. There's no sort of barrier to entry in that sense. Private permission ledgers are kind of the opposite. They are still distributed data systems, but usually there's a select club of people or organizations involved in that. I won't get too deep into the details here, but I just wanted to make note of these because it's important for interoperability. For the purpose of when you're trying to connect two of these different kinds of ledgers. And the consortium is a set of entities, people or organizations who decide to form a group and then operate a private permission ledger that may or may not otherwise be connected to a public permissionless ledger. It's getting a little complicated, but I wanted to make sure that these get mentioned. And then there's one more thing that I wanted to expand on is transaction finality. So for public permissionless ledgers that use proof of work, consensus algorithm, technically they do not have a transaction finality guarantee. What this means is that, for example, Bitcoin can fork, which means that different parts of the globe with different Bitcoin nodes were processing different transactions at the same time. So maybe in Europe, there were 10 transactions added that are completely different from 15 other transactions that were added in America at the same time. Because it's a distributed system, this can actually happen. And so the rule with Bitcoin is that the longest fork wins, which means that if this thing happens in parallel in time, and you sent someone money in Europe and your transaction was part of that 10 transactions, that will get erased because the longer fork wins. So the US with the 15 transactions will just become the rest of the chain. And sorry, I said transactions, but I should have said blocks, because those are the units of consensus when you're talking about transaction finality. And so now that we defined what transaction finality guarantee is, now we can say there's trouble with connecting, for the purposes of interoperability, a private permission system with a public permissionless ledger because of the lack of transactional finality guarantees on the public one. A very simple example for this in practice. If I send you US dollars attempting to buy Bitcoin from you, then we both would like to be protected from the money being clawed back and then being left with nothing. So what could happen is that I send you my US dollars through the bank, and the bank says, all right, this has gone through and it's final, it cannot be taken back. And you send me your Bitcoin, and that is potentially going to get reverted if it turns out that there was a fork. So then I would be left without my US dollars and without my Bitcoin. Of course, if you're a player who abides by the rules, or if you want to play nice, then you can send me your Bitcoin again just to make sure that I got it. But nevertheless, this is a danger. What people do to combat this issue is they wait a certain amount of blocks to confirm before they consider their transaction actually quote unquote final. What it means is that the more blocks you wait to be confirmed after your transaction was issued, the higher the probability that it will remain as it is. But it's technically never 100%. All right, back to the bank database analogy, just real quick. I'm throwing around a lot of acronyms here. There's going to be links for that in the next slide. All I wanted to know or say here is that the interbank payment protocols, such as ACH, which you've most likely used before if you sent money pretty much to anyone in any bank, are similar to blockchain era protocols such as SATP or CCIP or any one of these. And I've said this before, but I wanted to underline this parallel because it just makes it simpler to understand if you have some financial knowledge of how the banking system works, which I provided earlier. And then one more analogy is that the bank is similar to a private permissioned ledger. Access is controlled. You have to go into the bank and open an account. You have to show your ID. They have to actually approve it. If they decide not to do business with you for whatever reason, that's their thing. You can't do anything about it. And the same thing goes for transacting. If you send someone money abroad, they might decide, oh, this is a suspicious transaction, and we're going to avoid it. And then these are the similarities to a permission ledger. The difference is that in the bank there are no blocks, there are no cryptographic proofs chaining them together, and it's operated by a single entity. So this is where the trust model comes back in, what I was trying to explain earlier, which is that when you do things with a bank, you're just kind of trusting the employees of that institution and the government at large to make you whole if something goes wrong. And a couple more parallels when it comes to expressions used. the interbank payment protocol is the same as the blockchain interop protocol. And settlement time in traditional finance is basically the same as transaction confirmation time in chains where proof of work is used. What do I mean by this is settlement time is when you send someone money in your bank with, for example, ACH, they will have 3 to 5 usually business days while that money is in limbo. You can't touch it, but also the other person who's going to receive it cannot touch it. And they have this settlement time in to make sure that they approve it, so that they once they approve it, then it's final. So that's why they take so long with it. And if you remember when I was talking about transaction finality guarantees on public chains with proof of work, I mentioned that if you want to have a very high chance of guaranteed, or not guaranteeing, but if you want a very high chance of your transaction having succeeded and not getting reverted, then you can wait 6, 10, 20 blocks to be confirmed after yours. And so this is pretty much the same thing what you have to do with the banks. They just call it settlement time. And then in the blockchain world, you could call it transaction confirmation time.
Hey, Peter, before
Okay,
we
so the
move forward,
promised links.
Peter, before we move on, can I ask one question from the chat?
Oh, yes, please do.
Awesome. Have you looked at Holochain / Tether / XRP / Solana as viable crypto platforms for global banking?
Well, I haven't looked at them in detail. I know how they work. And I would not try to bet on any specific platform just yet. My philosophy, it's not investment advice, but my philosophy is to just kind of wait and see, because at the end of the day, adoption will be key. And the first platform or chain that gets through that proverbial finish line of critical mass adoption first will win big. But I wouldn't want to bet on which chain that will be. All I know is that whoever makes it there first doesn't have to be perfect. It just has to be good enough for the average user. And a good example of that is the banking system itself. The current traditional finance system has a lot of issues with user experience. It's slow, clunky, sometimes expensive. If you want to send a wire transfer, that can be like 10 or 20 bucks. But they put this system together mostly decades ago, and ever since then, it has been quote unquote good enough. So that's why it won the previous race for a financial system. So yeah, I think the race is still open. I don't have a definitive answer to you on that, unfortunately. If I did, then I would be a magician. But all I can do is look at the technical details. But then there's a lot of additional parameters to it that are non-technical things, like marketing and hype. Any other questions before I move on?
I think we're good to go.
Thank you, Sean. So here's a collection of links, just so that if you want to dive deep, you can. The interesting ones here for me personally are Fedwire and ISO 20022. These are the newer ones, so you might not have heard of these. And the reason why it's quote unquote exciting, even though it's kind of a boring topic, is because these are supposedly going to be making the traditional financial system more efficient. And so what I'm looking forward to in that is easier use. If I want to send someone money, it should be much easier, it should be cheaper, faster, etc. I don't know how much of that will be realized, but they've been working on it for years, and hopefully we'll get something out of it. All right, so use cases. Again, drawing parallels. At the end of the day, most or 99% of the financial use cases pertaining to the blockchain are the same use cases that the traditional financial system has. And the idea is to improve upon on those from the perspectives of ease of use, security, privacy, cost efficiency. I talked about this. If you want to send money to someone in Australia from the US, it could cost you 10, 20 bucks as a wire transfer. If you want to do the same thing with certain chains, maybe it's going to cost you $1, maybe less, but it could also be more. So just keeping the expectations real. It's hit and miss for now. And ease of use, again, hit and miss. If you are tech savvy, maybe installing a wallet and just sending some money on it is easier for you than filling out an international wire transfer form, but it kind of depends. Security wise, it's again a toss up. The thing with the traditional financial system is that you have the government guarantees on it. So if someone steals your credit card, then they will give you the money back that the thieves spent on it. If someone steals your private key to your Bitcoin or Ethereum wallet, then that money is gone. Privacy is also an interesting question because initially the wallets that have been created on the older chains, they are, as far as I know, some of them are still anonymous to this day. But there's also been some research into this, and a lot of the wallets that have been created more recently, like in the past 5 years, are relatively easy to de-anonymize. So my only guidance there is don't assume that no one knows what your wallet's address is. And so building on that, blockchain interoperability, the use case there is to enable the use cases mentioned in the previous slide while retaining as much as possible of those metrics. So I want it to still be convenient to send currency around, even if there are multiple different blockchains involved. The key expression or the key sort of thought here is that good interoperability is invisible to the user, because that is what it translates into convenience and ease of use. If you don't know how it works because you didn't have to learn how it works, then that was a successful kind of usage. And so there's another list of links to contrast the links I've provided for traditional finance in the previous slide. This is for the blockchain interops protocols. So there's a long list of them. The newest one, I believe, is on the bottom. It's EIP 7683. It's Ethereum specific. It's about connecting all the different cross level 2 chains to Ethereum, if you know what an L2 chain is. Unfortunately, I will not have time to get into that. And then another quick thing to mention here is that the software framework that I am a maintainer of in the scope of the LFDT, it doesn't try to introduce its own custom protocol. What it does is try to be a place for secure primitives that you can use to build implementations conforming to these standards. It's not nearly complete. We're still working on it, but that's kind of the pitch of the project itself, that if we bring together all the people who are working on this thing, then we can make it more secure because more eyes see more bugs. And a couple of notes on the risks. I mentioned potential loss of privacy. So apart from your wallet address being tied to your real identity, there's an additional risk with interop, which is that your address might not be known on ledger A, where you're trying to do a cross-ledger transaction, but it might be known on the ledger B. So for example, Bitcoin and Ethereum, if you're transacting across those ledgers, you might reveal your identity just by connecting two different wallets on those ledgers. And so this is a concern, or it might be a concern for some people. It's important to know about it because you can't say easily that the privacy guarantees of one chain translate to the other. Usually the way I like to describe it in technical terms is that whichever chain has the least amount of privacy, that level of privacy is the privacy that you can expect from a cross-chain transaction. And then there's loss of funds. We talked about it, the 2.5 billion theft in total. There's that's just the theft category, but there's also accidental burns, irreversible locks. We'll define burns and locks a little later. I'm almost there. I believe it's just a few more slides. But what that means is that even when no one is doing anything malicious, you can simply just make a mistake and lose all the funds that you thought you were going to send over to this other chain, for example.
Hey, Peter, before you
And-
keep going,
Mhm.
Scott asked, before you'd mentioned efficiency, what does efficient mean? There's a payment protocol like ISO 20022, but that is just the transport of information. There's also the efficiency of counterparty risk. So when you
Right,
when
so
you're saying
there's
efficient, what do you mean by that?
I mean, mainly cost efficiency and technical efficiency is in lower response time, lower settlement time, lower confirmation times for transactions. So cheaper and faster. Usually you have to pick one or the other, but in general, being more efficient means something happens quicker and with less effort.
Cool. And Gerald has a question. What are the advantages, disadvantages of using Cacti versus a solution like Chainlink or Wormhole?
Okay. I love that question. Thank you. So disadvantages of using Cacti is that it's a software framework. So you have to build software yourself if you're going to use the framework. It's going to be a lot more effort compared to if you take something that's ready to be used off the shelf, such as Chainlink. There's pros and cons to that. Whether there's more cons to it really just depends on your use case. If your use case can be perfectly satisfied with something off the shelf, maybe it's easier if you just go and do that. But there are use cases, or there could be use cases out there, which you will need some sort of custom solution for, because it doesn't exist out there as an off-the-shelf product. And so in that case, if you're going to write your own software anyway, then you might as well use a framework to develop that software. So I always make it a point not to try and pitch the software framework that I maintain too much. The short answer is that it depends, but I just gave you kind of the parameters of what it depends on. Any other questions before I continue?
I don't have anything now. Go for it.
Okay, thank you, Sean. Okay, so now we'll discuss a few of these primitives that I've been alluding to, and the primitives, and then we'll talk about how you can build up an actual protocol from that, and then the implementation later. So this is the finish line. This is where it can get a little deep. So I'll try to go through this quicker and then just leave some time for Q&A at the end, because I see that we only have 12 minutes left. Zero knowledge proofs. This is the slide has a copy pasted definition. All you need to know is that the one of the practical use cases for this is that right now, if you walk into a bar and you want to prove to the bar tender that you can legally drink, you have to show them your ID. And now they see all of that sensitive data, your exact date of birth, your driver's license number, or whatever else is on that little card. Zero knowledge proofs, in a use case, they could enable this interaction to only prove to the bartender that you are of legal drinking age. But they could not tell when were you born, how old were you, or what was your driver's license number. The only thing they would get is that provably you are indeed legally allowed to drink. It's not going to be a big part of the rest of the slides. So if this is the first time you hear of this, don't worry. It's a complicated topic, and I don't want to dwell on it too much, but I wanted to make sure that I explain the absolute basics about it so that it at least gets mentioned and put into your vocabulary. Okay, locking. So when it comes to locking, it means locking assets temporarily, which is very important. Locks are reversible, and the traditional finance analogy is that if you have a ripped up $20 bill, you walk into the bank, they will give you a brand new one, crisp, but they will take the old one and it will be scheduled to be incinerated. Wait, no, sorry, that's the wrong example. That's an example for burn. Oh, well, I mixed it up. So the point is, they lock assets on one chain before issuing another asset on another chain. So when you are trying to interact with, let's say, Bitcoin and Ethereum, for those two parties to be able to move value around the chains, on one side they will lock it, and then this lock will be the guarantee that that particular token can be used on the other chain. This does not sound as easily understandable as I thought it would, but bear with me and maybe it will clear up. So there's locking, and then there's burning. And this is where the traditional finance analogy comes in. I guess I copy pasted too much of the slides. Apologies about that. So you take the $20 bill to the bank, they give you a new one, but they'll burn the old one. They will literally incinerate it so that the total circulating supply does not change. And the important difference between burning and locking is that burning is permanent, locking is temporary. Unless you have a bug in your software, which I was alluding to earlier. If you're not careful, if you use the wrong smart contract to lock something, it can be accidentally locked forever. And then it has technically become a burn, which is very dangerous because you could lose the money that way. And then there's minting, which is usually the other side for both burning and locking. What this means is that I lock or burn assets on one side and mint on the other side, so that, again, the total circulating supply is the same as it was, but now you get to use the token on the other ledger. It's again, putting it back into traditional finance terms, it's as if you gave me money in the US, I locked it in a safe, and then I gave you money in Australia, you go and use the Australian money for whatever you want, and later on you go get a job in Australia, you get more money, and then you give me back my Australian money in Australia, and you come back to America, and I unlock it, and I give you back your US dollars. So this is how you can traverse with it. It's just very similar to foreign exchange, basically. And so these primitive operations are what are used to then compose the more complicated schemes where you can actually transparently or almost transparently move tokens across different chains. These are the foundations. Well, some of it. That's the other thing I have to say again, the disclaimer, which is that all of this is very, very simplified down. And any expert who looks at these slides would be like, well, what about this other thing? What about that other thing? Well, I just didn't have enough time to talk about all of them, but I wanted to give you a nice intro. And so wrapping is another important thing. The way that you can move assets, right? You won't actually physically move a Bitcoin to the Ethereum chain. What really happens is that, excuse me, what really happens is that you mint a new token. You mint a new token on Ethereum, which is a wrapped Bitcoin. So there's going to be a proof in there that you've locked your Bitcoin in with a custodian on the Bitcoin chain. And with that proof of lock, you can go to the Ethereum chain, and the custodian's Ethereum representative, most likely a smart contract, will take that proof and mint you a wrapped Bitcoin, which is going to be an ERC20 token that points a reference to the Bitcoin back home, quote unquote, on the Bitcoin chain. And so now anyone who's operating on the Ethereum chain can actually trade with you in Bitcoin, because they can say, I'll sell you something for half a Bitcoin, and you can send them this wrapped Bitcoin. Apologies, I'm losing my voice by the end of it. So one more important concept is the hash time lock contracts. It's a trustless way of exchanging tokens across different chains. Trustless is the important part, because you don't need a third party like you need with traditional finance. What I mean is that if you buy a house or a car, there's going to be some trusted third party who guarantees that the person who's selling the car won't run off with the car after you gave them the money. And they will also have the guarantee that you won't just take the car and run without paying. You know, these trusted third parties could be the government, the police, the banks, the insurance companies. The whole system basically is set up so that civilization works, and you can just buy a car and not worry too much about the scams. Although you still have to worry about scams, just a little less. And so hash time locks, very quickly, very simply, it means that you both put in money to the contract, tokens on the blockchain. When I say money, and either you both put in the money and then finish the swap, or after a timeout, you both get it refunded. So it only works if you both commit your funds upfront to this transaction, and then it goes through. If one of you tries to run off with the other person's money, they won't be able to. The time will just expire or run out, and then you'll get your money refunded. And so getting into the sort of higher level constructs, lock and mint is one of the ways to transfer assets. I explained about the wrapped Bitcoin. And lock and mint is going to be one of those methodologies. You combine the lock and the mint by saying, I'm going to lock the token on one chain and mint on the other. The circulating supply stays constant, but suddenly you can spend the token on the other chain. Burn and mint is pretty much the same thing, but it's a one-way street. What that means is that when you burn it on one ledger, it's gone. You can't unburn it. So you will still be able to transact with that token on the next ledger, but you're kind of on your own after that. If you want to take it back, maybe there's a way, but that's not a guarantee. And so, yes, the IATF Secure Asset Transfer Protocol, that's the one I'm explaining because Cacti, the project I maintain, is the reference implementation for this. So that's an example of burn and mint, if I remember correctly. And it introduces another important concept, which is the concept of gateways, specifically trusted gateways. So what that means is that there are these gateways that are off-chain. That's just software running that you decide to trust in order to perform these transactions more efficiently. And the transactions themselves are regular burn and mint, like I was explaining earlier. And so this is, again, where I highlight that trust assumptions are critical when it comes to interop, because that's the added part of the SATP protocol to a regular burn and mint. The extra part is that there are these gateways that are running software that you are trusting, either because you deployed them yourself or because a third party that you trust deployed them themselves. Oof, okay, I only have 10 seconds left officially, but if you have questions and if people want to stay a little longer, I'm more than happy to hang out and take a couple of questions.
Cool. Peter, we have 2 questions left in the chat. Number one, Scott makes a point. I see Bitcoin to ETF interoperability the same as TradFi FX, USD to Great British Pound. During this process, I want assets locked while the change of title happens. Does minting a token just open me up to a 51% attack? For example, just on a different chain.
Well, it wouldn't open you up to a 51% attack on Bitcoin, but it could be on the other chain. It depends on what the other chain is. And it also depends on the exact implementation. I know that sounds like a non-answer, but you really need to specify exactly which algorithm and exactly which implementation of it that you're using, because there can be different components that are working with different consensus algorithms. For example, in SATP, the gateways have consensus that they could reach or could not reach. So if you want to talk more about that, if you have more specific info, you're welcome to join the Cacti pair programming session tomorrow at 10 a.m. It's all weekdays, 10 a.m. Pacific time. Sorry, I should have said it's Pacific time. And we can try to get more into the weeds with that. And do we have any?
Yeah, Peter, I have one last question. What happens if I spend the Australian dollars? This is from Devendra. What happens if I spend the Australian US dollars in your analogy? What will happen to the locked US dollars?
So in the analogy, it will be in a safe of someone else, someone who is like a bank, as in they have a presence in Australia, they have a safe in Australia too, and they have a safe in America too. So you give them your dollars, they put it in the safe, And because that is now theirs for the time being, they can give a call to their branch in Australia and say, hey, give this person $20 worth of Australian money because we have his US dollars.
Awesome. Thank you, Peter. Before we stop, I would like to ask Professor Mdad, do you have any last words for us?
Just wanted to say that we really deeply appreciate what you presented about. It's one of those topics that 1 hour is not going to do justice. You need a lot more time to delve into the different areas. But this is a beginning for us. We hope that we can have the honor to have you back with us again with some more information on this important topic. Thank you, Sean. Thank you, Peter. And we invite all of you who attended this webinar to come back for our next webinar, which is on the 6th of November at noon. It's on Chime and Gen AI, how they're using it. So that's going to be another topic and another webinar. Thank you so much, Sean. Thank you, Peter, for this informative session.
Yeah, awesome. Peter, any last words for the assembled before I take us out?
Just my absolute pleasure. Thank you for having me here. It was a great honor to present, and everyone have a nice day.
Awesome. Thank you, everybody, for joining us. This is the Blockchain Interoperability Seminar for the FinTech Center at Morgan State University. We cannot thank the FinTech Center team enough. Professor Mdad, Professor Bopna, and Camry, who I'm not sure is still on here, but I want to make sure I get in a shout out to. You will be able to find the link to the YouTube, as well as all the links that are in, and Peter's deck and slides will be on the wiki page, which I shared a couple of times, as well as on the YouTube description, which I have to add to it after the video renders. But it's all going to be up there for everybody. We cannot thank you enough. Please check out the seminar on Thursday that Professor Mdad just mentioned. Morgan State, the FinTech Center at Morgan State does a fantastic job, and we could not be more proud to work with them. It's just a great team. And with that, I would like to thank everybody for joining us and hope you all have a great day. Thank you. Bye.